Okay, let's kick through here. I probably already covered some of this anyway. Skills-based hiring. I've got another question. I'm going to dominate this. Sorry, guys. Do you think skills-based hiring, this is to both of you here actually, do you think skills-based hiring inadvertently promotes off-payroll hiring? For instance, I have a theory that if we look at a person, instead of looking at jobs and hiring against job titles, for instance, we're hiring a cluster of skills, and we start imagining, okay, here's a cluster of skills in the body of this one person, does that not then kind of promote the concept of a non-payroll, in the sense the job itself becomes disaggregated into a bunch of tasks? What are your thoughts on that? Is that too philosophical?
My view is that there's going to be certain times that it will foster that and stimulate that, because if you have certain skills that they are not required on a continuum basis, they will provide flexibility, and you can actually go to market and get the best person or individual to do that role and to deliver that value in that amount of time. And going back to the skill set of a independent contractor is that they can come in and their onboarding is quite fast. They can do the job, deliver the task, and then move on to the next role. Now, as it becomes part of the total talent strategy, I think it's going to increase, probably in the future, the reliance on independent contractors. Now, I also think that it will have an impact on the permanent staff, because internal mobility programs, it's a big thing these days, and it's a way to provide job satisfaction even for permanent employees, that if you are doing a role for 2 years and then your skill set cannot be applied in another part of the business, going back to the utilization and to the job satisfaction, you can actually provide career opportunities even for the permanent headcount. So I think it's actually both. So it will increase reliance on the contingent workforce and independent contractors from a subject matter experts and the flexibility, and it will also increase job satisfaction with the permanent headcount.
Yep, James, you definitely want to say something.
Yeah, I think so. I'll flag straight away. Skills-based hiring is one of the things that we've not rolled out at Viasat, and I think as a business, we've made it's fairly obvious when you work in this function. So I don't think we are mature enough as a function to really understand what needs to happen to become really good at skills-based hiring. I think there's a behavioural change, system changes, process changes, and I don't think we're there yet, to be blunt. So I think the concept of it is an interesting one. I think done properly, yes, I think it could drive the move to more off-payroll work that you're referring to. But I also agree with Joao. I think there are certain things that we need to be very conscious of. Things like career progression for those individuals that are permanent employees of ours, that don't have the skills that you might instantly think you'd need to hire for a certain project. But we need to make sure that we still give our permanent employees the opportunity to develop their skills and grow into those things that maybe on paper they wouldn't have. So I think I'm going to sit on the fence a bit like Joao, and I think that done properly, I can see the concept working. I'm not sure that it's the right thing for a lot of companies, to be honest.
Yeah, it's still quite nebulous in this skills-based hiring. We're not quite clear what we're talking about, and it just reminded me about sort of Viasat situation where there is actually, there's some core domain knowledge required for a number of roles there. Skills-based hiring, in my understanding, is a little bit more underweighting the experience and overweighting, let's say, the potential or the skills. And you think that may be suitable at a certain level of hiring, maybe early entry, but is it suitable for someone who's going to be sending satellites into space? There's a cyclical rebranding in our industry, right? Like we kind of like to roll out a similar idea and just throw it out there. I think maybe because there's a bit of tension with regards to who wants what. There's some politics going on, and sometimes a rebrand is the purpose there. The skills-based hiring is something definitely. I haven't yet to see an organisation that's truly said, right, this is what it is. It's a big break from what we're doing before, and here's how it's changed. But anyway, let's roll on. We've got lots more to talk about with skills-based hiring. Very quickly, we'll put it to the audience here. Skills-based hiring in terms of any sectors. Are there any sectors that you think have been particularly prominent in moving more towards a skills-based hiring, or Is it still kind of floating around with no clear distinction as to who's doing this the right way? And in fact, I read a really interesting post earlier this week. Again, it was a cynical post, but I really liked it. It was a guy that said, skills-based hiring, the rebrand of skills-based hiring has come from professional services, and actually professional services organizations are perhaps the only organization that does do skills-based hiring in its pure form, so to say, because everyone's rotating project to project anyway within that. But that's very different from different types of organization that have very interesting. Okay, let's keep going. Technology. Is technology a driver for skills-based hiring? What are your thoughts on this? Like, does it promote this concept of, my understanding of skills-based hiring is, okay, we're going to de-weight the experience and then, upgrade, if you like, the skills, which is, whether it's traits or behaviors or whatever. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts would be that I mentioned earlier around, companies needing to do it well in order to be successful and to order to properly go through that complete cultural change required. I think it would be impossible to do that without technology. Again, I'm no expert in this field, but I would imagine that the types of AI and search criteria that technology and platforms will provide you would be a lot easier to do than potentially any of the manual processes or tasks that we have to go through at the moment. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think it will play a role. And going back to Izzy's comment, I think there's a lot of companies that are already hiring on skills. Where I see that technology will play a big role is actually bringing and mapping these skills at the top of the organization. Because if we think how the majority of the organizations, ignoring professional services, media, and some of the tech companies, because I do believe that there's some companies that are there in the forefront of managing companies by skills. But the majority of them, if you go to an organization, you ask, how does the organization look like? They will give you an org chart. Even though that at the talent acquisition level, people are hiring for skills, if you go bottom up, when they get it, they just get a org chart with roles, and the decision makers, they have very little understanding from those roles what are actually the core skills. I think what the technology will enable is that bringing all of that together and then play back at the top decision making, giving and enhancing the role of talent acquisition and the HR, and give that visibility on what are the core skills that those roles are entailing. So I think technology will help do that mapping, and then start the recording even from projects or roles and impact. What are the core skills, and bringing that visibility.
Yeah, I think tech is super important. Has everyone built a skills taxonomy? Everyone tried to do this by themselves on a spreadsheet? Fucking nightmare, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's a total nightmare. It's a shame Andrea had to leave. I think she tried to do that a couple of times in her career, and she said, actually, it's not possible because skills obviously move, they change, and they also decay. So you might think this is a skill we need in our business. 2 years down the line, guess what? That is obsolete. So you need to constantly update this taxonomy. You can't really do it without technology. Yeah, internal marketplace. Huge issue, but again, this is where PS is kind of, I wouldn't say has it easier, but basically because of the internal liquidity within the organization, it makes more sense. But an org chart, if you think about what that is, that's a pretty rigid structure. And we're trying to put like a bunch of human beings into this rigidity and then expecting them to flow through. Not easy. Okay, let's roll on. Key factors driving the rise of flex talent. So let's imagine we talked about cost already, about utilization. What are the factors might be promoting the concept of CEOs thinking actually we need to reduce the FTE component of our workforce?
So I think that this is a really good question for lots of reasons. I think that one of the things that I think again it was Izzy earlier referenced in one of our earlier answers around getting visibility of your full workforce. It's not just the people, but it's also the off payroll. It's also the AI involved in that. I think that understanding the benefits of a flexible workforce is part of the battle, and being able to articulate. So whether you're a CEO, again, they won't care what the makeup of their workforce is as long as the work's getting done, as long as the the size and type of the workforce is proportionate to the volume of work that needs to be done, they won't care, right? But I think that on a more TA and P&C or HR level, understanding and having an education about what the different worker types can and can't do for your organisation is a key factor. So I think education, generally speaking, is a pretty key factor here. I think, you know, in terms of more generic market trends, I think that, you know, I think I saw a report a couple of weeks ago that says that there could be up to 5 different generations in our current UK workforce, because, you know, UK retirement age is rising, and, you know, the people that are just entering the job market right now have very different things they need to get out of their job than the people that are maybe towards the end of their career and very close to retirement. So I think that an organisation that's going to say we're going to have a completely permanent workforce and it's going to encompass, you know, up to 50 different, an age range of up to 50 years is going to really struggle. So I think that being able to pick and choose and have that wide array of skills and experience and motivations in a workforce is really healthy. So
that's a really good point. Let's sit on that for a little while, because we haven't talked about things like diversity and inclusion at all during this conversation, but probably one of the most inclusive thing you can do as an organisation is to actually think about different types of work that you're offering the marketplace. A full-time on-premise, you know, 9-to-5 worker, that the default person that you have in mind when you design that is probably a 25-year-old to 35-year-old single man that has no responsibilities at home, that can come in every day and do all of this. And guess what? We have people leaving the workforce. I think the UK in particular have got a massive crisis of women leaving the workforce after COVID, not come back because we haven't provided flexibility. You've had people who come to the end of their careers. Maybe they don't want to do 40 hours a week. I mean, what options are we providing those people? And I say those people, but all of us are moving towards that, you know, seemingly very rapidly, right? All of us are moving towards this end. Like, what's the option? Can I stay providing value to the company, but maybe not 40 hours a week? Maybe it's 20 hours. Like, why is that not even there? So the flexi workforce, I think, is an inclusive workforce. It's interesting to see whether that's actually, I think those two things kind of dovetail, but does one drive the other? I mean, what, in your experience, and again, a panel first, but the audience, is DE&I a conversation that lands with the CEO when you're talking about flexi work, or are those two things considered to be separate in the mindset of the C-level? Any thoughts of this?
The people that probably should own DE&I think it's probably, you know, the corporate social responsibility team, along with the wider people and culture or HR leadership team. But ultimately, unless you get buy-in at the very top, I think it's very difficult to get that rolled down the entire company. And that probably is where a lot of companies have maybe struggled. That's my thoughts.
So what we are seeing, it's actually quite interesting, but more particularly on the contingent workforce. We are seeing, like for the last months, a lot of the clients are actually asking for D&I reporting for the contingent workforce, because they do see it playing a big part of their diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. And they see it that for two things. One, it's the different mindset. So like someone that it's a permanent employee, it's probably very different than someone that it's living their life as an independent contractor. So they see that as part of bringing diversity. And then they see also about innovation and creating a more inclusive environment where like you might have people that come in to do a specific role, and then how does that also impact and stimulates the internal culture. So it's quite an interesting thing, because I would say probably 1 year, 1.5 years ago, we wouldn't hear a lot of D&I against like the contingent workforce. And now it's a common theme, and and to your question, I think it's coming also as an executive agenda to bring that together, because they do consider it a strategic part of the workforce.
Yeah, it's also quite interesting to know what the gender division is between people who are interim or set up their own companies, I suspect actually it's very male still in the UK, and this is different in different countries, like who sets up as an independent or as a contractor. I don't know, my gut tells me in the UK it's pretty male. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? It is, yeah.
We have actually got some data on rates.
One comment on that actually, because I think it's really interesting. It's interesting. I think I can't remember exactly who I was overhearing, but you know, the role of the permanent employees in the organisation will care about the D&I initiatives and how inclusive they feel the company they're employed by is. But actually, one thing that we've just started doing on natural assignment ends or exit interviews is interviewing our outgoing contractor workforce, saying independently, what do you think? What have you seen elsewhere that works really well? Because obviously we're only getting one side of the story, which is what we think is the truth. So we've got access. There's a lot of things we've started adding to our exit interviews for contractors. Actually, we realise that we're missing out on a huge opportunity to independently grill people about practices that we do that they will have seen 10 times elsewhere. So it's been quite. We've literally started 2 weeks ago, so we've not started analysing. But I hope that, and I believe it's going to really help us understand. I went back to that maturity piece. I said, we might think we're up here actually, but the reality is what the market believes us to be, or what other companies are doing is we're actually down here. And actually knowing exactly where you are on the maturity bell or maturity curve, whatever you want to call it, is half the battle. So that's something that we've started doing. It might be interesting.
That's a really kind of powerful argument for increasing the flexible labour force, because these are all people that can provide competitive intelligence to you with regards to what's going on, benchmarking at the very least, but also, hey, listen, the reason why this doesn't work is because I know this because of the last time I worked in a structure like that. And if you're just circulating within the permanent workforce only, that are locked in, to the metaphorical 4 walls of the building, then that's where groupthink emerges. So perhaps a component of flexi work actually gives you market intelligence that otherwise wouldn't be available. Very, very good. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Oh. Have I gone too fast here? I think I have. No, I want to talk one more thing about integrating the total talent universe. So, for instance, you have FTE, non-FTE. By the way, that's binary. There's lots of different flexibilities out there. I think part of the confusion is that we often think of that binary distinction, but in fact, the non-FTE could be what? Part-time worker, a job share, someone who's a gig worker, someone who's on a platform, someone supplied by a third party. All kinds of different structures might emerge and fall into that bucket. How do we create like an integrated company culture? How do we create inclusion on that framework where everyone kind of feels as if they belong to that organization? Any thoughts on that?
So I think it's really, the simple answer, which is never simple to roll out, is to get the people that are in charge of talent strategy in the room when business goals are being agreed year on year. So I think that the people that have got the ability and knowledge to shape a talent strategy, that should roll up into the business goals. Now the reality is that I expect very rarely happens. It certainly doesn't happen with us, unfortunately. I think that to the point raised earlier, the people at the very top probably won't care what the makeup of their workforce is. They'll care about the work being done successfully, and it's the role of the talent team, or in whatever that looks like in every company, to deliver against that. I think that the more that the talent team understand about the business strategic goals early on, the better. And then the more proactive as a function we generally can all be, the better, for various reasons. But I think that it's important to remember that the talent team, or P&C team, resourcing team, whatever they get called in your organisation, I think that recruitment is probably about 5%, 10% of all business leaders' jobs, but it's 100% of ours. So we need to politely push that point across and say, ultimately you understand your business area, but let me handle this for you. Let me work on this for you. And I think I've had that conversation twice. It worked once. It didn't work the other time. But when it worked, I've rarely felt more empowered in my day job than when somebody at the VP level, which fed up to the C-suite, eventually backed me to do it for them. And it's a really interesting and eye-opening experience. It's also a lot of pressure, but again, fortunately it did work. But it's very empowering when does happen. So I'd suggest it's worth having a conversation with people to see if that would work in your company, because it certainly helps us a lot at the early stages of Inmarsat for sure.
Sorry, James. What was the proposition to that in that scenario? You were saying you're going to take away the hiring away from the operation manager and say, listen, I'll sort this.
No, when I mentioned around being a 5% and 7%, no, it was more that, you know, instead of the recruitment and talent team being dictated to about what kind of worker we need and how we should source and onboard them, we were saying, well, like, you can tell us what, to your point, skills need to be done, what projects we've got coming up. You know, you need to tell us what the resource management internally looks like, because I don't have visibility of that, you know, working where I work. But when you give me those plans, I will give you a talent strategy that I think is, or we as a function think is best suited to your needs. And you just got to, you know, I don't teach you how to launch satellites, please don't teach me how to use recruitment kind of mentality. Politely. But again, when it works, it's a really powerful thing. That's kind of what I meant by that.
There's a really interesting example hit the news earlier today. A company called Northvolt. I don't know whether anybody's familiar with Northvolt. I think they're a Swedish company, maybe a Danish or a Norwegian company that does batteries. The big battery, the kind of EU's most prominent. This is our big green tech sort of thing. We're going to get batteries built in Europe and do whatever we need to do. It's going bankrupt. Right, it's going bankrupt, and it's like every country. So you know all about this, Izzy. I read an article on The Guardian today, and I just noticed how many times they mentioned workforce in that article. I mentioned it 3 times, where they couldn't hire the people. They put the plant in this place, which is miles away from where the people were. And I was just thinking, you know what? The CEO completely underestimated the resourcing requirements here, which is why that business is going to go under. And that's like EU taxpayers' money is thrown into that. And now they're begging for Germany to bail them out, for Sweden to bail them out. And it's like, you know what? What happened here was exactly what you described, James. Fairly for the recruitment team to step up and say, actually, if you're going to locate this building someplace, you've got to talk to us about it, because we're going to have to staff this, and we can't staff it in this place that you've decided to put it. So they didn't complete neglect on both sides. So a very, very interesting case study. So I think that's probably worth grabbing and circulating internally if you're struggling to have that type of dialogue. A CEO is not paying attention to where talent needs to be in that conversation. Yeah. Let's imagine clean slate, no compliance issues, no problems of this type. How could technology help an organization manage a contingent workforce? We're talking about performance, utilization, etc., stuff like this.
Yeah, so what I feel that's a big challenge is that if technology is not in place, even answering the question, as basic as it is, how many contingent workers are you engaging? If we ask that to many people, they don't even know that. So I think what the technology brings, it's going to bring a crystal clear real-time visibility around utilization, number of people, where they are, so are they located in Europe, in US, and then you can also start to drive a lot of the trends. So for example, benchmarking. Are you paying for this particular contingent worker 10 times more than another division? So technology will basically centralize and bring insights and reporting in a ready, available way, real time. So this already exists going back to the permanent workforce. There's already normally good solutions in place for this. But then for the contingent worker, I think there's a gap that the new service providers just focusing on contingent workers are bringing that KPI standardization, and then almost looking from a performance, utilization, and cost perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked earlier about people not even being aware of the numbers of contractors on that, and that's no shame. That's a standard situation, particularly when you've decentralized those decisions to hiring managers. They're not going to update a spreadsheet for you. Do you know what I mean? You're going to crack on. Okay, cool. Let's talk about compliance and risk management. We had a few of those questions earlier today. UK specificity, especially with the new government coming in, they're going to make some changes with regards to status of worker, for instance. Do we know anything about that? How does that affect sort of companies' appetite for hiring people that are non-FTE?
Yeah, my thoughts are that will massively vary company to company. I think one of the safest things that companies can do is outsource that to a third party. I'm not just saying that because YunoJuno responds to this. So this is the shortest answer I'll give on this entire panel, but I would suggest outsource it to an SME would be my advice on this one.
Yeah, especially if you're going to go like international, let's say. We haven't talked about, let's say, the globalization of talent, but if you're looking for developers, data scientists, whatever, they could be anywhere in the world. Where they're located actually creates certain conditions for you as an employer that are going to be different. Now, if you're going to take all of that on, that's a nightmare. You need some sort of solution to deal with that compliance kind of risk. Okay, we're going to move quickly on. Oh, this is an interesting slide. Worker classification, quick one on this. Where are we going to be sort of in the new Labour government? Haven't they changed the worker classifications? Do you know, Joao, what's the situation?
Yes, I think there's no final decisions yet, but there's a direction to move worker and self-employed. I think the key question there from a regulatory point of view is it's going to add simplicity or and that would be great because like there's still today a lot of confusion between the three different status, so worker, self-employed and employee. Or when we move forward, if the self-employed is going to be too narrow. So I think for me it remains still unclear what's going to be the final piece and how we are going to deal with that. But it can be good, or if it's very narrow, it might exclude people that are real independent contractors and might place them as full-time employees.
Yeah, very interesting. I did a Brainfood Live on this a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember who it was with, but it was really good debate with the CIPD, some employment lawyers on screen as well, and we're saying, look, we're moving down this road, but the signs of hope are the new government seems at least to be interacting with business and being open to
consultations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what keep an eye on. Data protection is an interesting one, particularly there's rules with regards to how you keep employee data, for instance, full-time workers. There's certain things that you can and cannot do. We're all familiar with that. How does that roll over into the non-FTE workforce? Any guidance on this?
One thing that is quite interesting in here is that there's all of these ones, they have all local requirements. And this is where also technology can help a lot, because the requirements might be different, but normally the direction is not too dissimilar. So if you have the right technology in place, this can also be a very pleasant experience because you guide the hiring manager and the worker alike towards what is needed to check all these boxes. And that's why technology players that build these rules and basically key in these requirements. Worker, for example, says I'm in US, the user interface will immediately ask for US what's needed, and the same will be basically on the hiring manager. So this is something that it's very close to home with YunoJuno, because this is one of our big USPs, and what we stand for is like, we normally say make compliance delightful experience, because this is normally the part that no one wants to touch, and that sometimes there's not even ownership within the organizations on who owns these boxes. It might end up in a joint ownership that it just then delays everything.
Yeah, this is going to be work for us. If you think about going right at the beginning, we talked about the pressures that are creating a more flexible workforce, the need to do more of less, the constant sort of push for efficiency. That actually is going to have a dispersal effect in the jobs that you're recruiting for. So there's going to be a global dispersal of jobs, which means that you're going to have lots more employees operating in the different jurisdictions that change all the time. So you can either track that individually, you can find some sort of compliance solution that lives with the legislation as it changes. Final question on data protection. I don't want to like go too far into this, but what happens for candidates or with talent that transitions from one classification to another? That is something we can anticipate happening. I'm an employee full time. That's great. I decided, you know what, I'm popping out of this. I prefer working a little bit more flexi, and then the person gets rehired back 2 years down the line as a contractor, or maybe immediately transitions to a contractor. How do data protection laws, like how do you handle that, James, if that's a circumstance you're familiar with?
So that's a very good question. That's not something that I've actually had to deal with at Viasat, so I'm not the best. I can't actually answer that with any position of authority, to be honest. Again, I expect that the system that houses or manages that contingent worker would have the audit trail that you need to put into that, but that's a guess. I don't actually know the answer to that.
Yeah, so I would assume, and we don't do at YunoJuno normally those transitions, because from contractor to employee, we facilitate them, but then it's the company. I'm going to make an assumption in here, is that they would just need to go through the privacy policy and all the onboarding, and potentially there are enhanced requirements if they are full-time employees as they gain more access. But to be honest, I wouldn't see material challenges from that perspective. I would see if they are changing countries, then that potentially will trigger the normal data protection, more probably from the server side. But I wouldn't see any major issues from that perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Future of work. I guess it's a broad question. We'll throw it to the two on panel here, but it might be interesting to get people's views on this as well. What is sort of the critical factors for a successful management of this total talent universe we're talking about? Is there any like general themes that you could share?
Yeah, so actually probably an amalgamation of a lot of answers given previously in the room. I think that getting the right people in the room when you're deciding what your talent strategy is going to be really important. Making sure that the right people are ultimately in charge of what that is as well is something that's going to make your life easier. Having visibility of your total workforce in whatever guise that looks like, whether it's X% by a percentage or by number or by region, it's impossible to do workforce planning if you can't see your workforce. That's a fact. So being able to see where they are and who they are and why they're here and what they're doing and who brought them in and all of that stuff is critical. It's easier to do that in a system than it is, or a platform than it is to do it manually. We've done both, so I can tell you factually it's a lot easier with the system. They would be the kind of things that would spring out for me.
Yeah, so I kind of resonated. I think one of the key aspects is actually bringing the talent team and give them full visibility as much as possible of what's coming. Because in the end of the day, I see this as a real alignment. To have like a total talent strategy, the HR, TA, even like sometimes procurement, they actually need to be brought in at the very early stages, so that they allow time for planning and identify what are the requirements. So I think that for me that's the critical part, and that comes then with visibility, having the right technology in place to accelerate and facilitate that knowledge sharing, so that people can focus really on the future rather than sometimes looking in the mirror and see what went wrong.
Yeah, and that's the classic experience. This is why recruitment always feels like crisis management.
Yeah.
Because it's like thrown over. This person needs to be sort of recruited yesterday. Well, okay, if you give them 60 days in advance, all the recruitment problems would get solved. Right? If we had just a bit more runway, we'd solve everything. But we never get the runway. You know what? Interesting. As an aside, I think artificial intelligence will support this because the reason why the information doesn't arrive to us is because it's typically siloed into departments we're not in. But AI will have a de-siloing effect. It will basically make the data more accessible to more people. So there's a big opportunity for us to actually get involved in some of this stuff. Okay, I think that's about it, everyone. So we're going to skip the round table because we're already well over time. Just a round of applause for James and Joao for being part of the panel. And thank you to everyone here who turned up. I hope you got some value from it. I hope it was educational. Make sure that you share. We'll find a way for everyone to connect, so you can keep the dialogue going. Particularly if you think that expanding the non-FTE workforce is going to be part of the story going forward. There is a takeaway. Make sure you grab one of those before you leave. So thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate having a chat with you today.